Welcome to the Joy Quota podcast. I'm Dylan Fole.
And I'm Gavin Malcolm.
Our guest tonight is Bryan Gardner, self-made entrepreneur, businessman, super successful, awesome dude. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, you guys are going to love this. We get into all kinds of topics from being athletes to starting businesses and what it takes to really make that happen and to create the lifestyle that you want. And if you guys pay attention, there's a lot of real good nuggets in here, so enjoy.
Where do we start in this conversation though? We cut in somewhere. You were talking about something else first.
Oh man, I think
downhill mountain biking.
we're talking about downhilling for a bit,
I thought it was
and
something else. We're talking about
just that's right, talking about just being a late night person. Like I don't get a lot of sleep anyways, and so
yeah, that's right.
It never used alcohol or anything to fall asleep.
Yeah.
Because my mom was a real bad alcoholic,
Uh-huh.
and so I just naturally always stayed away from it because I just have a lot of addictive genes in my bloodline.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
So I was like, I think it's probably best to always
Yeah.
keep 1 foot in the pool, 1 foot out of the pool.
Yeah.
Because I don't really believe in just hard no forever. That just seems like a different form of trap.
But you have trouble sleeping, just you've always had trouble sleeping?
No, I just enjoy staying up late. So
I see.
I will wake up at
You can't
6
sleep
with the
in?
rest of the world,
Okay.
but I refuse to go to bed earlier than 11 o'clock.
Yeah, you guys.
So
you guys
I'm just
love waking
constantly
up early.
burning
I see
myself
videos,
out.
You'll post a video at 8 a.m. You guys jumping.
Yeah.
Dirt jumping. It's really? You guys woke up at crack of dawn to go do this?
That's when the sun sets. The
really?
sunrise
Yeah,
is the best, yeah.
We did the sunrise once.
Yeah.
That was the earliest we'd ever ridden.
Yeah.
And probably one of the only times I'm going to get up that early to ride. I usually have a rule of no riding before 10 a.m.
I mean, it's the most
your body's just not
rewarding-
ready for it.
Seeing the sunrise, and going outside, powder days, that's my happiest memories of But I've done it so many times by now where I think I'm not that it's boring or getting old to me, but more so of just I don't know. I guess I've done it so many times that I just want to focus on something else at the moment.
Yeah, it feels almost too routine.
Yeah, maybe. And it's also just the hobbies that we're all into, skiing, biking, whatever it may be, requires a lot of checklists, right? Oh, don't forget this stuff, and make sure it's all organized really well. And you get to the place and you're I forgot my goggles, I forgot this, and ruins the whole day. So I think too many days have gone by where that happened, and it I had to turn around from a 4-hour I-70 drive, and it slowed down my winter sports activity. I went from skiing 100 days every year for 7-8 years straight since I was 18. Now I'm skiing a dozen to 20 days tops, and focusing more on biking because now that I got into biking, I realized it's a lot less people, and I can drive to Trestle in less than an hour from my house, and there's nobody there.
Oh yeah, I'm the same way. That's why I never got into any real winter sports. Dylan goes up a lot during the year, and I was always
What do you mean? We're huge into sledding. We didn't
sledding.
go up
That's
that
fair.
much,
I'll
but
go sledding
I don't really
all the
get
time.
the sledding.
That's the most Joy Quota.
That seems silly.
That's what's so fun about it. Silly
It is a bit silly, but it's
always a good choice.
You're
you guys
on
have been
this
doing
thing.
it. The first time I was okay, I get it. It's a fun thing to do one time. But you guys have been doing this routinely for years now.
Yes.
Yeah, we're trying to get good enough to hit some backcountry shoots on sleds.
Yeah, I think you guys should be lobbying for a sledding in the Olympics.
Yeah, that'd be sick.
I'm not sure what you would. How would you? They already have bobsledding. That's
No. This is a totally different type of sledding. It's the difference between
sledding down the dual slalom course.
it's a difference between slalom skiing and half-pipe skiing. Freestyle sledding is what you'd call it.
Yeah, that'd be sick.
Yeah.
I wonder what the
backcountry sledding is where I would like to take it though, for real. Drop some real shoots.
What about e-sleds?
I've thought about it, yeah, because our other buddy, who also happens to be named Bryan, is really good at that technical kind of stuff. He built his own electric car.
Twice.
First, you're telling me about this guy,
Yeah. And so I did pitch it to him when we were hanging out one time, and it's definitely possible.
An electric sled?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Run me through this.
Oh, it's.
I'm excited.
I mean, in my mind, it's just it's a Red Ryder or whatever you want to use, your little Walmart sled.
Yeah.
And on the bottom, it's got a battery pack attached to either tread or preferably a tread and a jet engine.
Yeah.
Electric jet engine.
That is such a good idea.
Not a Red Ryder. That wouldn't work in powder.
No, yeah.
No, you'd want some sort of a hard plastic.
It could be a saucer, and then you could change the direction at any point, so you could just...
Yeah, like a little snow tank that you're just driving around. That'd be so
giant
sick.
saucer. Yeah.
You guys,
this conversation
I'm
is
so
going
fired up.
into a very weird rabbit hole.
That's not that weird.
No.
This is by far not the
That's like
weirdest
a regular
thing that
conversation.
Yeah, this is about normal.
Sled.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
So, I mean,
we'll convince you.
What got you into downhilling and mountain biking? Was that just something that you picked up, or did someone introduce that to you?
Yeah, so like the long-winded story, I guess, that I'll try to condense is that when I was 18 and 19, I was just like a ski bum up in Breckenridge, and I had no aspirations to like go to school. I was going to maybe be a firefighter. Had no idea. So I was basically just trying to be as good as I can at the thing that I loved the most, which was skiing. Although I didn't really learn to ski growing up much. I skied a handful of times in Michigan growing up in Ohio. And then being thrown into this world in Breckenridge and Keystone where you've got literally the top of the top pros, right? And I idolized them because I was like, watching all these ski movies constantly, and I was obsessed. I mean, I was a just total ski bro, right?
Yes.
And like one day when I was 19, my second year, bumming it up there, whatever you want to call it. I was at the top of the half pipe with it was like Tanner Hall, Simon Dumont, all my the guys I worship from a ski perspective. And I just remember thinking I had some new skis on, and I just remember it was early season, and I remember thinking for some stupid, my stupid brain was like, I'm gonna try to do something that catches their attention, in some way or another.
Yeah, of course.
We've all been there for sure.
And to this now, I say it to this day, that trait still is resonant. It's still just this thing that I have that is probably maybe broken, but at the same time sometimes works for me.
Yeah.
Anyways, I go down. I drop in. I was decent at the time. Next thing I know, I wake up and there's people.
That's always the beginning of a good story. Next thing I know, I woke up.
And third most it's my third concussion, but it was the most severe by far. And and I somehow I'm good. I didn't want to embarrass myself, because I just there's so many people there. And so I ended up in the parking lot, wandering around for my car, which I don't even think I had a car. And
oh, no.
Yeah, and a patroller, someone called it in, and I ended up in the hospital. I mean, this is I went out there with $2 in my pocket, you know what I mean? I didn't have any money. I think I was on insurance through my mom or something like that at the time. So thankfully I had some insurance. But anyways, I had a spinal compression fracture along with broken hand, broken shoulder.
Jeez.
It wasn't collarbone. It was broken hand, broken shoulder, and a spinal compression fracture, whatever that means. It means basically gave me this really bad deterioration in my lumbar.
Mm-hmm.
And which is something that a lot of people can relate to.
Yeah.
But it was very severe and very early on. So when you have that early on, it's not good because
especially if you don't work on it right away.
And so exactly right.
It just compounds over to the top.
I'm not much of a routine PT is not really a thing for me. So I got into this is becoming a long-winded story.
Hey, we got time.
So at the time, my girlfriend's father was way into road cycling, and I was reading about the benefits of road cycling to your lower back, massive.
Yeah.
That's PT. So instead of me going to do these stretches and do these boring things, it became something where I was okay, I can do this somewhat fun, adventurous thing and also help myself.
Yeah.
So I got into road cycling. I don't like road cycling, but it was fun enough at the time, and I enjoyed it for years. And then I rode for University of Colorado when I ended up going there, when I was 20. yeah, had fun with it and got my biking legs up and stuff like that, and got the feel for like, I rode bikes when I was a kid, but like got the feel for like actually how to like do skills.
Yeah,
like
where it becomes like a weird second brain that just takes over. Like I can get on any bike now because I've biked for so long, doing the same thing where it doesn't matter. Like my body already knows what to do. I'm not giving it commands. It's like breathing. It's just going.
Right. And I learned a little bit more later in life. So like, like I definitely have, like, you can tell when someone learned when they're younger versus older, but I tried pretty hard. Anyways, the point of the story is that I got into it through road cycling. And then when I was, I'm 32 now. So like when I was like 26, 27, I went to Trestle, which is, the winter park, just for, I guess, listeners at home, it's the winter park downhill course.
Absolutely. One of my favorite places on earth. The place is sick.
And like I rented a bike and, maybe I had bought like a $400 like shitty, trail
Trek
bike
or something.
Yeah. And I was like, I'm going to do this thing called mountain biking that like, everyone, like some people have been talking about.
I'm in Colorado, I might as well.
Yeah. And like, it blew my mind. Like it just was like, this is the most fun thing I've ever done ever. The next day, sold my road bike, never road biked again. Every time I see a road biker, I'm just like, that is so not what I want to be doing. And yeah, I went into it hard. Like I for the first 4 years, and still to this day, I still probably try to bike like 100 days a year. I've got friends that bike 300 days a year.
Yeah, we have a buddy that does enduro that does that, and I'm just like, how are you doing this?
Actually, my buddy that I brought this Idella wine in, it's his vineyard. He bikes probably 300 days a year.
Wow.
So he's somebody that I admire from a biking perspective and a business perspective as well. But on a side note, but anyway, so that's kind of what got me into mountain biking, and then getting a trail bike and like getting more cardio and getting that whole like euphoric, deal with like, if you're riding trail, you're riding up the hill.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys know much about.
Yeah, I love riding up the hill almost as much because it's just a different.
Yeah.
It's like when people are like, I really love running. And it's like, how is this possible?
You have to appreciate it. It's an appreciation. It's not, there's fun. There's different levels of different types of fun you can have, And that's like my thing now. But like, I'm also a very like conscientious of like the fact that I'm habitually changing hobbies. Like 2 days ago, I bought a Miata because I went out to LA for the second time in the last few months to meet with my buddy who got into track racing, and he has a Miata. It's all like,
all decked out.
Yeah, not like all decked out, but like, it's got the track stuff set up, and I was like, I kind of got hooked on that, so that's kind of my thing like this week.
Yeah.
But I'm still doing the downhilling, and I'm signed up for like 8 different downhill races this summer. And those like signing up for something I think makes me more committed to like training, because now it's like, okay, if I'm going to go to Whistler, I better
be good.
I better be in shape, because 10 pounds of fat, which is like easy for me to gain, becomes a pretty dangerous situation when you're riding Whistler at 40 miles an hour and 60-foot jumps.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean,
that's crazy.
We can certainly all relate to the like changing hobbies all the time, for sure. Where it's just like, I feel like this is probably just a trait of yours in general, which I think is a really cool thing. You just seem like our friend Zach, who you're only capable of being 100% in or 100% out.
Yeah.
Like no matter what it is that you're doing, whether it's a hobby that you're into for a week, like for that week you're 100% in, until all of a sudden you realize something that would, I couldn't be 100% in, so I'm just going to back off that and go do something else.
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, I see what you're saying, but I think there's also a large part of me that measures risk pretty heavily. Like, I'm not the guy that blindly hits the road gap.
Yeah.
I watch friends go and do it 3 different times until I'm like, okay, I'm as good as them. I'm capable of doing it. So like there is a level of like, I do know guys that are 100% into it, and I feel like I'm probably just a little bit held back from that, which maybe protects me.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing to have. A little bit of understanding of risk.
I like to scope things out, whether it's, and not just talking about, the biking topic, but just like in everything. I scope things out and do a lot of research. I like the aspect of learning about things just as much as I do actually doing it in most cases. and that's really what drives me, and that's what drives my friendships. Like I like it. A lot of my friends are engineers or like somebody that has some specific knowledge, skill set in some specific area, because there's so many people that I meet that they don't really have much else to talk about besides like the common things like sports, which is fine, and I envy that, but it's just something I'm not. I like things that are like really fascinating that not a lot of people understand, that are complex.
Yeah, like being able to understand enough of some crazy topic where all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's a new thing that I have a vague understanding of that most people probably don't.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that probably has served you really well over the years, that need to really want to learn and enjoy learning the process of, or learning about whatever it is that you're into, right? I'm sure that that's helped you a bunch through your business, acumen, and through friendships, like you said. I bet that's probably just a really helpful thing to have in life.
Yeah, I think that a lot of that kind of comes from the wisdom that I may have learned when I was, 18, 19, 20 years old, where I started to realize that the world is a lot smaller than I thought it was, and that things aren't as difficult as they seem. Like anything is really possible. I came from an extremely, mediocre childhood. Like I didn't do well in school. I didn't learn that well in that classroom environment. So I think I had these like, people telling me, or like maybe my own mindset telling me that like I'm not capable of doing these great grander things, or living these like living this type of life, when in reality all I needed to do was like meet one person that's good at one specific thing, and they can teach me all about that, and I can learn that, and they simplify it for me. Or I can go online, which really opened up that opens up a world of information, and figure out exactly what people are doing to make this thing work, whether it be, in my particular case, business.
Yeah, it makes things a lot more approachable and understandable for sure.
Yeah.
So was there like one specific thing that triggered that, or was it like over the time? So you went from like being a ski bum to
being pretty driven, and
yeah, how did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I have remembrances of like, or recollections of growing up very young, like we're talking 7, 8, 9, like my earliest memories. My brother and I grew up in a situation where money was always like the like constant stress, right? And that really messes with kids. A lot of people can relate to that. And so because we never had money, it was always, when you don't have money is always the number one thing that you think about.
Yeah.
When you do have money, it's easy to say money is not important, right?
Yeah.
It's so easy to say that, but so that was me from a very early on stage. So I was just broken from that in that regard. Not to say that it affected my entire life, but it was definitely a major part of like I have to be financially stable in my life, period. And then as I grew and got older, and people kind of I didn't have guidance. I didn't have father figures in my life, so the only guidance I had was like, oh, well, this guy is like the most successful person I know, and he's in accounting or finance, or he's telling me to get that finance degree, get that accounting degree. In hindsight, probably wasn't that's what I chose, but in hindsight, it probably wasn't the right choice for me. Even though it did help me out in some ways, I was terrible at it. I was like, I sucked, dude. Like I was the worst accountant ever. But I'm so good at so many other things. But I didn't have anyone to really recognize those.
Yeah.
And then when I started meeting people that had similar, that were successful, that had similar traits that I did, and this particularly happened after college when I was working in private equity and sales and doing all these different, wearing all these different hats. I started to realize that there's so many things that I can be good at and enjoy, that I don't even know where I'm going.
Yeah, like you finally figured out that like you don't have to just do something for money. You can actually, like someone, I'm assuming, saw some potential in you and said like, hey, why are you doing accounting? You are way better at this. Or like recognize that you were crushing it in sales or wearing all the different hats.
They just fired me and I had to figure out my own shit.
Yeah, well, I feel like...
Well, because when I first met you, I think you were still doing some accounting while you were starting Fly Petals.
I had previously, so the story behind that, and there's so many little nuances to these stories, and I don't want to drag on for 5 hours. But you may not know that I had a company before that, 2 companies before we met, before Fly Petals took off, that had success. And that when you start making money and you've never had money, so I was 22, 23, 24 years old, I was making more money than, I was making, top 1% amount of money for that age group, right?
Wow.
But when you don't understand money, which is something that not just people that grew up poor don't understand, but pretty much anyone.
Yeah, it's a rare skill.
At that age, it's difficult to have that kind of discipline, right? When you start making money that quickly out of college, what do you think happens? You think you're always going to make that much money. So I was spending like I was always going to make that much money. 2 years later, I was not making that much money, and my rock bottom was going back into the accounting world to try to crawl myself back, and it was a really painful time for me. And luckily, the management at that firm that I worked for recognized that I sucked at my job and fired me pretty quickly. Thank God they didn't keep me on.
Yeah, the small blessings, right? Of like, I'm glad that didn't work out because look at where I ended up. And
so the day that I got fired, I was like in this like relief, but also like, kind of manic, weird mode. And I vividly remember walking into my house at noon because my wife was still working. She wasn't home yet. And I just kind of laid on the bed and just kind of had a sigh. And at this time, I had already started Fly Petals, which was the e-commerce company selling pedals online through Kickstarter, which I had started like 3 months earlier, which the people at the accounting firm probably hated because I was because I had a side business, right? I had a side hustle that was making decent money.
Most employers don't want any of their employees to be making any money that isn't coming from them.
And I get that. I get that. But the cool thing is that the day that I got fired, I went home, I laid on the bed, and I had this big sigh, and then my eyes went like this, and I opened them, and I said, holy shit. And I pick up the phone, and I call Teresa, and I go, I got the best idea for a new company. And I told her what it was. It was Coopt software for e-commerce because I was passionate about e-commerce because I had done laser shirts. I had done a company when I was 19 called Gear Lobby because I was always passionate and interested in the idea of like the internet. I started, on MS-DOS when I was 7 years old. On, doing all kinds of like just weird, like, the internet back then was so weird and hacky and creepy. And like I understood that from a very early age. So like to see it progress into like, okay, now I'm buying everything, all my ski gear, all my bike gear, I'm buying it online. That fascinated me. I wanted to be a part of that.
That's a huge ability to see that market. I think a lot of people see things like that and just take it for granted instead of saying like, oh, I could be a part of that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so, I had these small successes with like physical products that we had like created and invented and manufactured, and like the headaches of going to trade shows. And this is all kind of during this time frame in my early 20s. But then just coincidentally, the day that I got fired, I had this idea for what became Coopt, co-opt and coupon, play on those words, which was a B2B e-commerce app. And I hired a firm to do an MVP for that, which within 3 to 4 months, we were able to launch it and took off. We had, within a few months, 5,000 businesses using the app.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, this is like working. I'm paying my, I'm living the dream in a way of like, I'm financially free. I was not a millionaire by any means. I was just making slightly more than maybe I was at the accounting firm type of thing.
Yeah, you're making just more than your bills, which is that's amazing.
Yeah.
On an idea, that just an idea from your head to translate to reality.
And that's part of it. I talk a lot about that, like, to people that want to, like, learn from me or whatever that I could consult for, like, the whole story behind it is like, I identify myself as a creator, whether you want to call that like art or whatever. I don't necessarily think it's like that far into the art realm, but more of just a builder creator. I like to do things and I like to take ownership over them. When people copy me, which happens all the time, they copy my products, they copy my strategies, everything that I've worked so hard for to figure out on my own. That's like really personal to me. So in that regard, it is artistic, you know what I mean? So I can kind of relate in some way to that. But to kind of go on that story of like how this all progressed is, I had this, this business-to-business e-commerce software that I could now see into the back end of all these thousands of different types of stores.
Yeah.
And the reality of, my previous understanding of what makes a good profitable website and like what an agency will tell you is like, like the way that it looks and the professionalism of it.
Yeah.
That's such bullshit. And that was a big turning point for me professionally, because what I was noticing is that it wasn't the nice looking websites that were making the money. It was the jankiest websites put up in a day with pre-made themes, drop shipping from China, making 20, 40, 50, 60, $100 million a year with 90% profit margins. I know guys personally who went from nothing to next year owning a 150-foot yacht with a house in the hills in Hollywood.
Jeez.
Who came from the sticks in Alabama.
Wow.
And I would call these guys. There's like 5 guys in particular, and they're my clients. And I'd call them and I'd be like, hey, I'm Bryan and I own Coopt, and how you do, how do you think about the info? That's great. I'm making like $100 a month off these guys. I'm making nothing. And they were just so open about everything. They'd be like, here's like, it's the craziest story, man. I followed this guide here, and I was just like, like, these guys aren't smarter than me. These guys aren't smarter than most people. So, like a month later, I started my own store, and the rest is history. I mean, I made a lifetime's worth of money.
That's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah.
I feel like that's such a big part of life, is being able to see someone who has what you want and having the courage to go ask them how they did it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people see others even in their social circles, like people that they really know, who they're still afraid to ask, like, what are you doing? You have the relationship that I want, or you have the business that I want, or the fitness or whatever it is. And I feel like most people are just too scared to ask that person, hey, how did you do that? Because if they really are comfortable with what they've built, they're going to want to share and teach that with others. That's like the point in getting there.
Well, I'm fascinated by what you just said, because the fitness thing is something that revolves around like me with bike racing and things like that in the last few years of trying to be more fit, because now that I'm 32, I have to watch what I eat.
You got to earn it a little more.
Yeah, you got to earn it a lot more, right? Like, and it only gets harder, I'm sure. And there's probably a lot of listeners that are like, oh, you're 32, you're still a baby, right? But so with fitness is fascinating with me, because like when people, not that I'm fit right now, but when I am in fit modes, like when I'm training and stuff like that, people will kind of, they might think of me as like, oh, this guy's got the answers to how to be fit. It's like, no, it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
You burn more calories than you eat. And I mean, you can get pretty complex with it, but generally speaking, it's just burn more calories than you eat.
It's pretty easy to find the vague direction to start walking in.
Like if you want biceps, do curls. If you want chest, do push-ups. Not that hard, right?
They're cliches for a reason. Like eat vegetables.
Yeah.
Like not pizza.
Yeah. The problem is that we're all broken in that sense of like we do things that are bad for us not everyone. I know some Boy Scouts that just lead these perfect lives, or seemingly, but that's the irony of those types of simple things. Now, it's not so cut and dry when it comes to creative aspects and relationships, right? And other things that holistically have to fit together to live a happy life. Fitness, relationships, I'm not saying money, but stability,
finances, for
balance,
sure,
right? And so that's something that everyone's got to figure out for themselves what that is. And I think that's so cool.
Yeah, that it is something that's up to you, especially as someone who likes to take ownership and stuff. I'm sure that's something that you really get a lot of joy and just passion out of. Is like, I figured it out. Like, I saw what other people did, and I made my own path.
Well, I think that's kind of the methodology, right? Is I didn't even necessarily figure it out. I owe it to other people that my methodology is I seek out mentors.
Yeah.
I seek out people who know something really well. If I could, I'd seek out the best in that in that profession, right? But that's not realistic. So I seek out people, whether it be locally or in my network. I'll ask around if I'm trying to learn something specific, and I will make it a point to befriend that person organically. Obviously, I wouldn't just befriend some guy that's an asshole just because I want to pick his brain. But I try to organically fit myself into that circle of friends, and over time, you learn things from them, and that's truly my secret, my method that I would impart upon someone else. It's not that the biggest takeaway from when people think I'm impressive is no, I'm not impressive. You can do whatever I did. The only difference is that you need your own methodology. Or
you just need to start making your own path.
Yeah, you need to do stuff to make stuff happen.
Yeah, 100%.
You can't sit around. It's not going to happen for you, and you need to fail. You need to fail. I've failed 10 times more than I've succeeded.
Yeah.
And any when I was skiing a lot and same with biking. You guys can relate to this. You get the best.
The most joy and enjoyment comes because it was the hardest thing to learn.
Well, I was yes, but I'm more so going towards you progress the fastest when you're falling.
Oh, 100%.
If you're sticking stuff, you're not pushing yourself. You're not growing.
Yeah.
You're just landing everything. Then.
Got to do yourself a favor and start trying some shit you don't know how to do.
Right?
Yeah. And so I'm laughing because the guy that I looked up to as a BMX rider, I remember being a kid and saying I want to be a BMX rider. Yeah. And then there was this guy, Bryan Gardner, and I was like, oh, well, he is the best at biking that I know because I saw him do a stunt show at Trestle, actually. Yeah. And I walked up and I befriended them and all that stuff. And in a video that they had produced, he's all broke off, sitting in a hammock, probably just smoked the biggest joint or something, and looks into the camera and is like, if you're landing stuff all the time, if you're not crashing on a regular basis, do yourself a favor and try something you don't know how to land.
Right.
And that because of that, I progressed really quickly in BMX, because I was falling 3 times more than everyone else at the skate park. I showed up, wasn't friends with anybody, and just I wanted to learn. So I'm hucking and just breaking the concrete with my body. But really quickly, I became one of the best riders in our little circle of friends. And then wherever that went from there, just because I was the most ready to fall.
Right.
Kind of what you're talking about. I progressed way faster because I was willing to fail.
Right. And you learn to fall. Eventually what happens is you learn to fall well, right? You learn the techniques to roll or whatever.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That you don't, and you can't, I'm in the hospital twice a year, so
yeah.
And I'm calculated, right? But that's the thing that I'm trying to get over is the hesitancy that I have that ends up being, my downfall.
Well, and I feel like that's kind of life in general, right? Like you probably would have stuck whatever jump you were trying to land or whatever crazy technical thing you were trying to do.
Yeah.
It's the hesitancy that kills you 9 times out of 10. It's not a lack of talent. It's not a lack of ability or skill
which is
or the
really
jumps or the
fear,
bike.
what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the same. It's synonymous, right? And it totally translates.
And I'm sure that same thing in business, right? Like because you started and crashed and burned enough companies, it was easy to save some companies before
crash and burn.
Yeah, maybe that's strong.
I floundered until I gave up on them.
Yeah, I like that.
Some of them did not.
Some of them I released
some of them never
to the wild.
They just
Well, so that was the thing that when we were talking earlier, you mentioned is failing fast.
Yeah.
Which
and
is
often.
But that's the key that some people don't learn, and there's that balance of like, when do you give up, or like when is the right time? How do you know if it's
right away?
If it isn't successful immediately.
Well, every situation is different, right?
Yeah.
So if I was in a situation if I was going to give 2 polar examples. So on one end, and these are probably on the spectrum of most common situations, but on the opposite spectrums.
Yeah.
So one example is when you have a project that you're working on that takes up, anywhere between 5 and 40, 50 hours a week of your time, right? And you're not sure if it's working, and it's not, week after week, month after month goes by, nothing's really happening to it. That happens to a lot of people, and or maybe they have a full-time job and they're trying to get away from it's the same situation, right? Their full-time job isn't working for them mentally, for their relationships, whatever. So my solution, my advice to someone like that is, there's I don't even know how many. With decent sleep, there's like 120 hours a week that you can really productively work. I'm not saying that if you work 120 hours a week on one particular project that you'll be really productive. There's some pretty good science that says that you won't be. But when you're passionate about something, you might be able to work 40, 50 hours a week. And then as soon as you get off work, which is exactly what I used to do, you go and work another 8 full hours on that project passionately and productively.
Mm-hmm.
And so people aren't willing to do that. Plain and simple. People that say that they've tried for years and nothing's worked. It's like, no, you're not working. If I was like,
if we
had a
the
lens
day
in
backwards.
your life, I could point out exactly what you're doing wrong, and they probably know it. Just like going back to the fitness thing. It's like you did 50 push-ups. I told you to do 250.
Yeah.
So for me, not that I work a lot now. I do. When time comes, like the last few days, I worked, 6 a.m. to midnight every day for 4 days straight. And because things needed to get done, and I'm working in a startup right now that just requires a lot of effort. But I'm doing that in the overall mission, so that eventually I don't have to, work much or at all, or I can only work on fun projects, right?
Yeah.
And so ultimately that's one polar side of it, is that people just don't put in the work that's needed. They don't do the push-ups. They don't do the curls.
They just shortchange themselves.
Right. And the other side is that they are working. They're busting their ass. But when you're in the weeds, or your head's in the sand, you can't step back and see holistically how it works from a realistic perspective. And also you're less likely to pivot, to adapt, right?
Totally.
And that adaptation process is really inherent among all levels of anything that you do, but particularly if we're talking about business, then it's very important to know what's working and what isn't. And the best way to do that, I think, is through feedback. But you also have to be careful about
where the
analyzing
feedback
where
comes
the feedback's coming from, right?
Yeah.
Like if I would make a video, for Fly Pedals or whatever for Kickstarter, and I'd ask, 10 friends and 10 strangers. And what do you think the feedback's going to look like for the 10 friends and the 10 strangers?
Yeah, I'm sure it's a little more soft-edged from the friends than probably a lot more honest.
Yeah. Every single friend loves everything I do.
Yeah.
Except for people that are really close to me that would tell me the truth. But even their feedback is biased, right? And
Yeah.
so that kind of brings me to the next point of being data driven, right? So focusing on how do you know what to do next? Think about the data and every piece of feedback that you get. Constantly strive for feedback. Analyze what this data is, measure the data. Friends data, it means 0. Strangers data means this or that. Friends data from this particular industry that I'm in is a 10, right? Literally, I write this stuff down in spreadsheets and then calculate out my predictive analysis of how successful this company is going to be. The one that I'm in right now, I think that it has somewhere between a 46 and 57% chance of succeeding, which is really high for a startup.
Yeah.
And I literally measure that stuff out. And who knows? I could be completely wrong, and it could be 90% or 1%. But those are things that I do.
But at least it gives you something to shoot for.
Yeah, those are things that I do to make sure that I'm always I'm on track, and I'm confident that I should continue working on this project.
Which goes back to the hesitancy, right? The only time you would ever stop pushing and take your foot off the throttle, if you're working that hard and you really believe in something, is all of a sudden some amount of fear or doubt gets in there, and all of a sudden you pull back just at the wrong time, because that's just how life works.
Right.
As soon as you pull back is the week before you would have made it, right?
Right.
And like you said, that's probably, I've heard a lot of things from a lot of different people on, getting feedback and really truly figuring out if what you're doing is working. And that is one of the most clever thoughts I've ever heard anyways. I didn't have the thought, but heard. I've literally coming up with a value for a friend's opinion means little, because they're going to try and comfort me and not be probably as straightforward as others. Strangers' feedback versus someone who's very specifically in that industry, or someone who's done what I'm trying to do gets a different value. That's crazy clever, dude. That's awesome. That's probably when shortchanged yourself.
Do you wanna share?
No.
But was that something you always did, or was that something that after a couple companies you started realizing this is something I should be doing?
Well, previous to a few years ago, I would just commit as much time as possible, thinking that the worst case scenario is that I just waste a bunch of my own time, and a lot of it is luck, right? So it's not. I did get lucky, absolutely, 100%. I got lucky on a few ventures, but in the same way, the fact that I've seen failure happen, I kind of see patterns of okay, when that company was in this stage, right before it failed, this thing was kind of happening.
Yeah.
And so if you've seen that enough, you have perspective, which a wise man told me when I was 18 years old that perspective is 90% of life. And when you said that, it seems like such a simple quote, but it blew my mind. Because I'm some small town kid from Ohio that doesn't know anything.
Yeah.
And he was a very wise person with a lot of experience, and that for some reason I could not get that out of my head. Perspective is 90% of life. What is perspective? Well, perspective in my mind is from a pragmatic standpoint is the ability to see things from past experience that you already know, or some people are capable of just reading about it and then kind of saying, or
seeing it from other people's past experiences.
Right. Personally, I'm very experiential, so I kind of have to go through the failure or the success in order to get the perspective.
Yeah,
I know that about myself, which is something that's why everyone should go through their own personal development, constantly be thinking about personal development in their own way that works for them, their own, brain chemistry or whatever you want to call it. So
perspective, I mean, sounds like that one moment of learning about what perspective realistically looks like in life, that it's 90% of life. Like, what was some of the first things that you did right after you heard that and it blew your mind? What was the next step?
I think it was a slow thing. I mean, that was the time where I don't want to say it was exactly that day or that week or whatever, but this is 14 years ago and I was 18 years old. So, I do remember during that time frame was the time where I was like, I'm getting out of Toledo. I'm going to Colorado. I'm gonna
go get a new perspective.
I don't care about anything else except skiing.
Yeah.
My perspective was like, this life that I'm living now it's not right. It doesn't feel right, and everything that's worked for me has been has started with following my heart and following my gut.
Yeah.
Now, I don't always think that following your gut is always the right case with certain matters. Like, you kind of have to measure one and the other.
Yeah.
But with big decisions, that's always been, where I lead, and I just end up trying to be as genuine as possible. And I fail, like, at a lot of things just like everyone else, and I, act a fool sometimes and get embarrassed or whatever. But the reality is that, like, I live my life. I try to live in the moment while also having the future, or I should say my future goals, my short-term and long-term goals, always in the back of my mind.
Yeah, like living in the moment, but making sure it fits into where you're going.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a really impressive trait to have, because I don't think that a lot of people do both of those things. I think there are a lot of people who focus a lot on the past or a lot on the future, or they're really good at being present. But I think that that's a real home run, is if you can, like you said, focus on staying present while knowing where this fits in your goals, in where you're headed, and making sure that you're not so busy in the moment that you start walking the wrong direction, or you start, doing the wrong things to get where you're trying to go.
Right. I think a big part of it too is, I talked a lot about my methodology of finding and learning from mentors. And this is something that is, like, really fascinating to me, because it's worked so well for me in my life. But it's not what it sounds like from, like, oh, find a mentor and listen to what they do and follow their direction. That's like the opposite of what I would consider, like, a successful relationship with a mentor. You have to really understand what people, because everyone's flawed, right?
Yeah.
Whether your mentor, your person you look up to, whatever, is a close friend or someone that's, elder that has some experience that you don't have, just because they say something doesn't mean that it's right. It's just their perspective. So you have to become really good at analyzing whether what they're saying is coming from a standpoint of, like, absolute true perspective, like they really know the answer and they're coming from that like that conviction.
Yeah.
But the funny thing about that is that this whole thing with the mentorship ideals started when I was 14, and my older brother, I only have one other brother, left for college. And it was just me and my mom at the house, and he was, he's my older brother, so obviously, like, I was...
Yeah, you look up to him for sure.
He's 18 years old, I'm 14, whatever. And I'll never forget this. He looked at me, and it was like the last thing he said before he left for college was, "Listen, I'm not going to be around anymore. Whatever Mom says, do the opposite." And it was fucking hilarious. But it couldn't have been more true. And sorry, Mom. but my mom, my dad, my whole family, most of people in Toledo, they're backwards, man. Like their advice is backwards.
It's hard for someone to take you where they haven't been.
Yeah. I mean, like if my mom had it her way, I would have been like, she would have like tried to make me be a doctor or engineer or a lawyer or something like that. Things I would have been awful at.
Yeah.
Because she just does not, I mean, I love her to death, and she I owe everything to her for taking care of me. But the point of the story is that everyone is a mentor in this methodology that I kind of talk about. That will eventually be written in some book. Not just joking, but
you're not joking. You just told us you're writing a book.
Well, the idea of book.
What is
Vague clippings?
You got a title? Vague clippings.
Dude, that's such a good name for a book.
Vague clippings of
Bryan
Gardner.
Gardner. To Mom.
Yeah.
So but that was so impactful to me that for the next 4 years throughout my high school career, it became more and more true. It wasn't just what she said, it was what other people said, and it was like, why the fuck are you giving me advice? You are the last person to hand out advice on this, on finance, on you're in terrible debt. You've been bankrupt. You're giving me advice on finances? You're giving me career advice? You work at Media Play. Like,
yeah, you hate what you're doing. Why would I listen to what you're doing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I don't, not to say I don't give unsolicited advice, but I give it in a humorous sense, I think. I don't expect people to always take my advice, but if I do give advice, it comes with a disclosure of take it for what it's worth. Here's my perspective, because that's how advice should be given. But people love to give advice, and I think it's like almost an epidemic in certain circles where people are, they will listen to whether it's their parents or a certain person in their life religiously and do whatever they say, and that's not how it works. That's not the gurus are a perfect example. Whether all due respect to people like Tony Robbins and all those people that do try to help other people, their methodologies are inspirational and they give you some euphoria or whatever, but it doesn't mean that it's going to work for everybody, and it doesn't work for everybody. Everyone has their own path, and you have to decide and learn from an early age how to analyze that information. And I call it data, but it's information. It's a path that you either that you're advised on, that you need to decide if that's the path you take, that you don't take, that maybe you take a piece of, whatever. That's everything to me. That's the baseline, the foundation for everything that I've done going forward. And
I think that's the most critical skill for any human to have, is to be able to really truly pinpoint what is useful out of whatever information was put in front of them. I've watched a Disney movie and walked out super inspired with a new idea, or, I could handle this situation with a coworker or with a friend or with my business, or what. If you're constantly looking for what is actually useful, applicable information, no matter what you're looking at or who you're talking to, it really weeds out all of the nonsense, right? You could talk to someone who's on the surface seems so credible, and at the end of talking to them realize nothing they gave me is actually useful information, versus talking to someone who on the surface might have no credibility or no seeming like it, and then you can say they said to do that, so the useful information is to do the opposite. The useful information is to do the opposite of what they're doing. Right. Therefore making them incredibly valuable.
Right. And I think that's what really successful business people do. If I were an expert in a specific industry and a peer or a competitor asked me what I should do in a situation, what do you think I'm going to tell them? Yeah. I'm going to tell them the worst advice ever, but I'm going to say it with so much conviction if I was an asshole. Yeah. I'm just saying people are assholes and they will do this. I wouldn't personally do this, but it happens a lot, and it's happened to me. And it's laughable, right?
You have to at least take it with a grain of salt, for sure.
And I pick it apart, and people don't like that. I pick people, when people give advice, I pick their advice apart, and that becomes a trait that people tell me, like, dude, you don't gotta comment on everything. It's like, no, like, you just gave me some shit advice and I want to talk to you about it. People don't like getting called out like that.
Yeah.
And not that I have all the answers, obviously I don't, but not even close, not even by a long shot. But that's become a thing that, you know, I guess I'm inherently an agitator, just like I'm a builder. These personality traits, like I'm a builder, I'm an analyzer, I'm an agitator.
Yeah.
Hence getting fired from
but I
most
also,
jobs.
Yeah. When I hear the word
I like to question
agitator, I'm picturing like you have to shake things up to get all the air bubbles out, or to bring all of the dross out of gold when they're purifying gold, or like any of these things. Like there has to be some sort of stirring it up process. Like even baking a cake, you can't just put the ingredients in a bowl. Yeah. There has to be some agitation. You have to kind of mix things up. You have to. And I think that people who are more natural agitators, for lack of a better term, like people who aren't afraid of like, hey, I'm going to call you out on this. I feel like it can lead to, as long as you're willing to keep your perspective glued on straight, to where you're at now, where it's just a natural thing where it's like, oh yeah, he was willing to look for good information. He wasn't afraid to confront poor information and to try really hard. It clearly that's the recipe for something great.
Right. And I think the funny thing about the irony about all this is like the people that get most agitated, the people that get most offended by when you call them out are the ones that are the most successful, the ones that they think they have the answers. You know, no, you don't fucking call me out. I have the answers, right? It's like, no, you're not. Just because you have $100 million doesn't make you. There's always some guy that's got 20 times more money than you, or 20 times more success than you, or fame than you, whatever. You know what I mean? If we're talking about business, but you know, and I think that shows their insecurity, and it shows that you know, that the truth kind of comes out, I think, and that I'm not gonna lie, it kind of like satisfies me a little bit when I can bring that out a little bit.
Well, and I think that's because you're just a naturally really genuine person. Like whatever you're feeling or experiencing, or if you're like passionate or whatever it is, you're just going to be that. There is no facade or anything like that. I do it
at the cost of my own embarrassment.
Yeah.
Like I embarrass myself a lot, but people don't realize like I did that intentionally. But people don't see that.
Yeah.
Like I don't care about, like I'm not concerned about my legacy. I'm not concerned about what people think about me. You know, I don't. In fact, I think that in over time it will be kind of revealed that what I'm doing kind of makes more sense than it does in certain circumstances. But yeah, and I met a lot of people that have similar traits. They are agitators, but they don't know it yet. And I kind of am like, dude, keep going with this. Yeah, like they'll agitate me, and I'll be like, I like this, you know. And to me, it makes me feel like, because to me, I think the weakest trait you can have is to be insecure, because it's the opposite. It's hesitance, it's fear, right? And I want to try to relinquish myself of as much insecurity as possible. Obviously, you're not going to ever be completely gone from it, but you know, that's ultimately the goal, because if you talk to any professional in the psychological world, they'll tell you that most people live in fear.
Yeah. In
some way, fear is what holds people back. And if we're being synonymous, fear, hesitancy, insecurities, these are all the same.
It's all stemming from exactly the same place. Yeah, 100%, dude. I think that, you know, what you're talking about of you'll have people call you out and react differently. And I'm sure that there's been people where you've called them out and stirred things up and been like, hey, was that on accident that you gave me poor advice? Or like, are we about to both learn? Or like, are we about to like learn that you don't actually have my best interest, or like learn where your insecurities are? Yeah. I think that probably is something that makes someone in a different column in the what is their opinion worth in the data, right? Like being able to call someone out and be like, hey, did you mean to, like, did you see this hole in your advice? Or maybe I'm just not seeing maybe I'm not seeing the whole thing, but like this isn't adding up.
Yeah,
and then
I think
being able to receive that in a way where they're like, oh, wow, I'm glad you pointed that out because I didn't see that. Or, oh, actually, dude, I'm sorry I didn't phrase that right.
Yeah,
and things like that.
I think it crosses, just to go back to the whole sports thing, because we're kind of like intermingling the two, because, you know, that's what we have in common, I think. It's the same thing with sports, right? Someone could be a really great mountain biker or BMX rider or whatever and have a certain style that works great for them, but it doesn't work for you.
100%.
And that I've seen that a million times too. Like I'll get advice and it's their genuine advice, and it's like it just doesn't work for me. Like I don't have that body shape, that the way that my weight gets thrown around, whatever. So yeah, it's just a lot of analysis and like I said, perspective, but most importantly, the foundation of knowing how you learn and who you are and what you're afraid of and what you're not afraid of and what you ultimately want as a goal in life. And if you don't know what you want, that should be the only thing you should be focused on in period.
Yeah.
And the only way to do that is to get perspective too. So it's like a big circle, right? So the only way, and I talk to so many people, and then when I had you know, lots of employees and I'm talking to them, I'm trying to like inspire them or like get them motivated. Like not everyone's motivated by money or bonuses or whatever, or some people are motivated by learning. And I tried to get to the bottom of like, you know, like what's your just from like a human level, like what's your goal? Like what do you want out of life? And the most common answer, I mean, you can probably imagine, is I really don't know. You know, people go, I don't know what I want. I don't have you're passionate, you know, I don't have those passions. That I hear that 9 out of 10 times.
Yeah.
And I choose to believe that they are capable of having passions or having you know, goals that they strive for, but they don't have them now.
Yeah, it hasn't been a priority, and it's a really intimidating question to be asked, because I'm sure each one of us has been on the receiving end of that question at some point in our lives and not known the answer, right? And that's like a really intimidating moment, and for some people, that's enough to make them back off and maybe not approach it, versus there are others like yourself where I'm sure someone was like, well, what do you want, Bryan? And you're like, I don't know. And then immediately went to work figuring that out because you saw it was a problem.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it comes back to trying things. Like you said, we all have lots of hobbies, and it's like trying those different hobbies. If you're not trying stuff, you're never going to find out what you're passionate about. Like, how would you know you're passionate about sledding if you?
Yeah, and not everyone has experiential hobby. Like I've have a lot of friends that are into the whole like personality scoring or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
And like, you know, I get that the three of us in this room are probably fit into some similar, you know, like
I'm sure there's some overlaps.
Experiential hobbies, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is that a large part of the population just isn't like that. They don't need to experience things. They can get satisfaction out of, you know, reading a book or doing something else that's not, you know, like that. The point is that it's all the same though. I mean, you just have to, if you don't have a passion in life, you're going to die without a passion in life, and that sucks.
Yeah,
like
100%.
Like that's the point. Like we're all here and we're going to die. So like, you know, as funny as that sounds, like just make it good.
Yeah. 100%. Totally
right. I mean,
it bums me out to talk to people. Most people are like that. It bums me out, and they just don't. They're just like, I just want to watch the game and after work, and
it's like, but are you watching the game because you're like excited about any part of it, or is it just because that's what
like
they're doing?
You know, some people are like that.
Because I do meet some people, because I'll like try and sometimes that's like part of the fun of being someone who has a lot of passion is trying to draw it out in other people. Like we were just talking with our friend Brandon last night, and he's really into kendama. It's like this wooden Japanese toy.
So
and
flip it up and
he's like real good at it, and he brings it with him everywhere. And he'll literally like make people get excited and passionate about it just because he's like, you're all at the DMV and none of you are excited about any of this. I'm going to freaking supercharge this place. And he's, handing them out to people, and he'll bring extras, and people are missing their, ticket or whatever and getting called, and they're like, oh, I'll go later. I'll just pull another number because they're finally experiencing a little bit of passion. Just as like
the DMV is the perfect
to
example.
Go push people out to go get some passion.
The DMV is always and places like it have always fascinated me because you've got, and I went there the other day actually, or yesterday to get a license plate, because you've got anywhere from a dozen to, depending on where you're at in Denver, 100 people sitting in a chair like this. Maybe they're looking at their phones nowadays. Like 10 years ago, they probably weren't, but they're just kind of blank face, and they keep looking at the thing. They have the same face on. Right? But inside, everyone is doing the exact same thing. Inside, their inner self is going like this. And like that cracks me up because I'm looking around going like everyone is losing their fucking minds, but they're holding it together so well.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel like when I was working at the accounting firm or when I was working at other places, like that's the same thing. Like, dude, you this isn't, you're not having fun right now. Like their thing is like, not to, call out like accountants or whatever, but like, a lot of people's careers that are like, well, I'll just stay doing the thing, and 10 years from now, 15 years from now, someone will throw me a bone and I'll make, a good living.
Yeah, a lot of people get into a career based on everything besides passion and what they're actually excited about or what their goals are. Yeah. I feel like it always comes down. I talk to a lot of kids my age where they're like getting out of college, they're starting some form of career, and they're like, yeah, well, I think, this will be able to provide me a lot of like stability, or, the benefits are good, but I don't really care about the job, or like all these different things where I don't think anyone at this table was ever able to give up on, like it had to at least kind of be something we were passionate about.
Yeah.
And even then, like if it wasn't something we were really passionate about, there was just no hope, right? Like in accounting, you're like, yeah, I'm not into this at all. I'm going and saying the best thing that could ever happen to me is they fire me. Like I've had that same thought at so many jobs where I'm like, please fire me today. Give me an excuse to not show up anymore and go do something so much better.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's pretty wild. What do you think that there is something that people can do to kind of jumpstart that process of finding a passion?
No. I've lost all hope in trying to figure out, people that aren't, that I maybe someday I can get that perspective, but it's kind of sad, but no, I kind of feel like just, I don't think that a lot of people are capable of doing it because their fear is so great. Yeah. I should backtrack. They are absolutely capable of doing it. Everyone is capable of doing it, but it won't happen because they're incapable of, or extremely
it's not that they're incapable of doing it, they're incapable of taking the action.
Well, they're incapable of overcoming the fear.
Yeah.
It's being courageous.
100%.
Like, I mean, everything about courage to me is like, to be cheesy with like a whole Steve Jobs quote of like, his Stanford speech where he said, wake up every day realizing that like I'm paraphrasing, wake up every day realizing that like you're going to die. And like, if you have too many days in a row that aren't fulfilling to you and aren't, satisfying to you, then fucking stop doing that and do something that you really want to do, because ultimately you're going to die.
Yeah.
And as morbid as that sounds and as ridiculous as that sounds, nothing could be truer.
Yeah. 100%.
No, that's really great.
Unless we all live in a simulation, of course.
Elon Musk,
In which case
big
you
shout
hit the
out.
reset button and
Yeah.
back in the studio again.
Respawn. But even then, it's like if I'm going to be restarted into something, I want to be restarted into something I like. I don't want to have to live a.
Dude, you might be in like
horrible...
Halo next time. I don't know.
I'd be okay with that. That sounds fun.
That'd be so wild.
Halo. Do kids even? I don't think kids know Halo anymore.
Dude, there's like a Halo movie now. It's kind of out of hand.
Halo's in like X Games.
Yeah, dude.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I'll compete.
Speaking of X Games and the fact that like you can be a professional video game player now, I feel like that's something I really try and stress to people. Is like you can make however much money you want doing whatever it is that you want. If you are willing to figure out, like, keep trying until you get the recipe right, you can make it. I met a professional cliff jumper. All he does is go jump off of cliffs and film himself, and that is his full-time work. He's fully passionate and all about it. His name's Travis. We just had him on the podcast, and, like, it's so crazy to me. Like, I guarantee there's someone out there who's just hella stoked on knitting and is making, like, good money knitting some weird specialty thing, and they get all this passion and fulfillment from just... That's what I want to tell people is, like, whatever you're passionate about, go do that because you can make a living doing it. I don't know how, but I promise you there's a way. There's a million ways to make $1 million.
The hard part is like a lot of it is luck too, right? Like if you guys like are so passionate about like BMX, for example, like it's really hard to make money in that industry unless unless you're the top of the top. Yeah. And like so, and a lot of it comes down to like.
Well, as a rider, right? But then I know tons of people who are in the industry who make a living doing things BMX adjacent, where they're like, oh, I can actually support the industry this way and still be 100% involved. Or there's always an in. There's always something you can do around what you're passionate in and about and committed to, where you can start making some income. And if you get good enough at it, you can be paid well for it.
Right.
Just like you've always been really passionate about, you've always been a competitive, passionate person, and you start hanging around some people who are good at business. You're very committed to making finances happen since you were a kid, and all of a sudden you've managed to find some ways to do it all around things that you're passionate about.
Yeah.
I mean, the Fly Pedal, one of the first big things was literally around bikes. Like, it's literally something you were like, oh, I'm passionate about this. I don't want to be a professional road biker or mountain biker or any of that, but I can still add and push the ball forward doing something I'm passionate about.
That particular product was my business partner, Dan, who's a very close friend of mine, that he just needed help with other things, so we just partnered up on that. But it like that's a perfect example of kind of like how the luck kind of came through, and like my previous experience, had I not had that, wouldn't have been him asking me to, jump on board. And I've had, I own at least a dozen companies now, like just from those same types of things. Like, can I give you equity? And you just advise me every once in a while for phone calls, you know what I mean? And so I don't know. A lot of it is like luck
But the luck to me is preparation meeting timing.
Yeah.
Like, you can't be lucky if you're not preparing to be lucky.
No.
Like with your, buddy Dan, like you would put in a lot of preparation to be lucky enough to have him call you and be like, hey man, I would love to bring you on board for this. Or I'm sure many of your other projects, or you worked really, really hard on other things to all of a sudden, you built your e-sales company or the app for the B2B sales. Right. And literally because you had worked in all of that, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm lucky enough that now I can start talking to these people. Like, luck is something you truly make, in my opinion. And it's because you were preparing and constantly working. Yeah. Of course you were lucky because you were preparing and building yourself.
I wasn't afraid to fail. I mean, I was just going, and I was just an engine that would just not stop.
Yeah.
And when things didn't work out, I just tossed them to the side and never thought about them again. Or I I shouldn't say never thought about them again. I learned from them, but for the most part, they don't affect me, and I don't think about them because that becomes like a bummer, and it becomes a drain on your motivation, your energy.
Yeah.
And energy is what I tell every entrepreneur, especially when they start new web stores or websites or whatever, is when they have everyone has these new ideas, and they come to me and they go, I got this idea, what do you think? I think I'm going to do this and this, and I go, stop. Like, the greatest resource you have is not your idea. It's not this connection that you have. It's your energy. Literally, the amount of energy spent to get it from idea to prototype, and then once you get a prototype, then you can do all kinds of stuff, right? But people get stuck in that idea phase, and they blow all their energy. And I see this like so often. I see it all the time. And I tell people, and the thing that really gets me is that, like, I tell them exactly how this is going to play out. So it's going to play out in two ways. One, the most common thing is that you're going to get stuck in this idea mode. And you're going to blow all your energy trying to refine the idea, writing down all the different things about the idea, making the idea better. And you're not going to spend any time or energy to get it to the prototype stage. Whether if it's a prototype, it's physical product, or we call it an MVP, a minimum viable product, if it's a non-tangible product. So if they're not making strides to get to that MVP or prototype level, then they've wasted all their energy, and 100% of the time they fail. And so luckily that's never happened to me, because I've seen it happen so many times. But it has happened to me where I get to prototype and I'm like, this prototype sucks, fail, toss it in the trash, or prototype and then manufacturing or product release, crowdfunding, whatever it is, and then feedback is terrible and sales just don't work out or they're lackluster, and I'm just like, it's not worth my time, and I fail it, right?
Yeah.
Pass, fail, get over it. But the thing that I would impart on people that have those ideas, because everyone has these ideas. I mean, Dylan, you've come to me with a couple ideas in the past that were good ideas, right? And you made it happen. The problem is that they just didn't work after the prototype phase, which is fine.
Yeah.
But at least I admire you for doing that. Like the vast majority of people don't even get to the stage where they have the product, and they do it. And so, yeah, your energy is everything when it comes to having those ideas and that creativity.
Yeah, an idea is only as good as the energy you're willing to put into it. Because you can have the best idea, but not be willing to put the energy into getting it to the next stage. Like,
some ideas are require shitloads of capital and just
that's true. Yeah.
But yes, generally, like, the types of products that I specialize in and can afford are ones that can be bootstrapped. Yeah. Right. And thankfully, we live in an age where so many more products can do that.
Yeah. It's crazy now. Like, I'm excited to see where this kind of age takes us. Yeah. Right? Because the internet opened up so many doors, and now there's so many different ways to fund a project. Yeah. And so I feel like we're in this crazy, almost like renaissance of so many cool ideas and less than cool ideas, but so many ideas are actually being thrown out, and someone's taking action on them, right? Like, before, I think it wouldn't have been possible for a lot of really cool ideas to have happened without Kickstarter and all the different ways now, and without social media being able to reach out to people the way that we can now. Right. I feel like we're just in this crazy boom of ideas happening, people making stuff happen.
Best, in my opinion, definitely hands down the best age, regardless of the partisan issues that we have that just bum me out that I don't even think about.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what keeps you going? What keeps you passionate and driving forward? Like you've mentioned, you own 12 companies. A lot of them, or several of them at least, are successfully kicking back money. You said you sold your e-commerce for a lifetime's worth of income, yet you still work on new companies. What keeps you doing that?
I think part of it revolves around perspective. So like once you make more money, you have a lifestyle inflation. So like, you get used to the whole family living a little bit more luxurious lifestyle. Not that I think that that's like, really important, but it definitely like, it's hard to break that once you've kind of been in that. So you kind of always want to be, in my mind, I always want to be moving forward and doing more things and like, oh, I've never done this. I want to experience that, right? I want to experience, not like the superficial thing, like I want to have a private jet or whatever, but like I want to just be able to constantly be experiencing new things. And that is one part of why I want to make more and do more and meet more people. Another part of it is that like everything I've done so far, although I've been lucky, I really do call it luck with the financial aspect of it. They've all been, everything that I do because I like the idea of having an impact to other people. Like I build something that people around the world can use, enjoy, hate, love, whatever.
Yeah.
Make them more money, right? If it's a big business to business stuff. And so that drives me. So now I'm at a point where I'm not interested in doing those smaller things anymore. So the new company I have, RelaBoost, whether this is, the big one or it's the next one, whatever, but the one I'm in currently is called RelaBoost, would have a very big impact, and that drives me. That's what drives me now.
Okay.
It has an impact because it's disruptive to the financial industry, and in what my mind is a disruptor, whatever you want to call it, to debt, which I've seen personally, and obviously it's no surprise that debt ruins lives and is a serious epidemic.
Yeah.
And this company, RelaBoost, which I won't talk too much about, relaboost.org, you can go there.
Yeah.
Is one minor step in a larger, greater plan to accomplish something that can do really good things for the world. But beyond that, if the question is what drives me, literally what gets me out of bed and gets me, to start thinking about the next steps or processes or whatever, working with people and making the strides to propel the business forward. I mean, I guess I could ask that, you could ask anybody, like, when you guys, if you're talking about, if we're relating it to, again, back to BMX, because you guys are such great BMX riders, you land your first 360, your first backflip, and then you perfect it. You're not going to stop. You're going to go for the next thing, the bigger jump. Like, it's just a thing. It's just a thing about certain people that, you got to do something bigger and better.
Yeah, you get addicted to the learning and the growing and like, oh, I accomplished that, which means now I'm freed up to go accomplish something else.
Maybe I'm capable of doing, I didn't think I was capable of doing that. Maybe I'm capable of doing this, and I'm still young enough where this could be a pretty impressive, career or milestone in my life. But there's so many facets of it. I mean, beyond that, most of what I do, especially in the last 2 years since I had my first child, is based around, and even before that, when I knew I wanted to have a family, is based around, I want to have an imprint on my kids where I'm how do I want to put this? Like, I want to be a role model, not just in the sense that I was there or that I provided financially or whatever or helped out around the house, but I also want to be like someone that has done so many things and accomplished things and made an impact so that they can get inspiration from that. And I'm not naive enough to think that that's for sure going to happen. I don't have expectations of them doing that, but I like to think that, and I've seen this, personally with other families where, like, one of the parents or both of the parents have, something really special, impressive about them that that basically, propels the inspiration within the family.
Yeah. Being able to provide perspective for them of saying, like, look at what was possible for me. You're starting out same place I did, if not better.
Third base.
Look at yeah, exactly. Like, look at what I did with what I had. Look at what you can do with what you have, kind of a thing.
Well, there's got to be a fine balance of, like, how many spoiled kids there are if their parents are successful.
I'm not picturing, like, literally what they have. I'm saying, like, the values and the things of, like, you made it where you're at, not based on any of the tangible things. It's all of the X factor. And I think that's what I'm picturing when you say, like, you want to inspire them. It's not inspire them to, like, have anything tangible. It's to have the ability to go forward without fear of failure, or the determined nature and the confidence to be able to agitate or to relinquish themselves from that uncertainty and the insecurity that you've worked so hard at, is what I'm picturing. Because that's really what, after an hour and a half of chatting with you, is so obvious, is that's what you're the most passionate about, is pushing people out of their comfort zone, past their own fears and insecurities, especially yourself. And I can't imagine that no matter where your kids end up, you'll always be pushing them for that. The intangible stuff.
If I'm going to push my kids at all.
Yeah?
I think I'm just going to kind of let them do their own thing. I really don't know. My kids my one kid is so young, and I have another one coming in a few months, but I think about that a lot, and I do a lot of research and observation on, like,
Is the data.
Yeah, got to get that data.
How much control you have over that, and, like, I think that maybe like in 10 years or however many years it takes to, like, really get an idea of who this person is.
Yeah.
Before I even understand how I'm going to approach that. I'm not going to be like, Michael Jackson's dad or Tiger Woods' dad.
Yeah. Sing, damn it. Yeah.
Right. But, I don't know. I mean, maybe they're just, like, going to be awesome by themselves, and I just kind of stand by and let them do their thing. I've seen that.
Yeah.
I've seen that happen as well.
Totally.
So, yeah, I really don't know. But ultimately, when I think about other dads, other parents, a lot of people don't have a lot going on, and I could be wrong, but I feel like it makes it more likely that their kids will also not have passions.
Yeah.
Will also not have hobbies or be interested in things.
Definitely.
And that something I would like to stay away from.
Yeah.
Because I want to, and not just with my own kids. I want to create an impact of inspiration so that more people can identify what their passions are through some sort of methodology that fits with their personality. With mine, like I said, it's with
experiencing stuff.
It's with experiencing stuff. It's with finding mentors and anti-mentors, or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm. Everyone's a teacher. It's just what kind of lesson, what to do or what not to do.
But other people, they might not need that at all. They might not need anybody except, knowledge from a book or a teacher or whatever. But that I'd say is that's what drives me. That's ultimately what is behind, the energy that I put into anything is that.
Heck yeah. That's awesome. I mean, what a noble set of cause, or a noble cause to go for us. I think so. Being able to get people to discover their own passions, because if they really are about it.
That's kind of the point of the Joy Quota as well, is, like, trying to inspire people with what we're doing, whether it's something crazy or not. Like, it doesn't have to be
whether
insane.
it's something small that someone on the podcast says, or it's seeing us jump off of our roof on a sled over a fire, like whatever it is.
Right.
Hopefully they just say like, oh, wow, that was really cool. I'd like to try something similar. And then they discover that they're really into anything.
Right.
Like, that would be the coolest.
Right.
Will be the coolest, is the coolest. Speaking it all into existence.
I mean, we've inspired a couple people.
Yeah.
Yeah?
One at a time.
Can you talk about it a little bit?
We've talked about it a couple times, but it's a lot of little small things of people just saying, like, I forget that I live in Colorado and I'm like 2 hours away from the craziest nature. And you guys reminded me of that, and I went and took my family up there and we saw like the woods, and we went on a camping trip, or like whatever it is, or oh man, I was going to stay in and be boring one night, and my friends all invited me karaokeing, and I know that I really liked singing my whole life, but now I'm like an adult and a mom, and I don't go out and do stuff. Yeah. And that was exactly when, scrolling on Facebook, I saw the Joy Quota, and sure enough, I went out and had a blast. And like little things like that.
That's awesome. That's so
is
cool.
like what makes it fun for us.
That's so cool.
That's what it's all about, just pushing the ball forward and inspiring someone to knock over the next domino in their own life.
Right, because then hopefully they can inspire somebody themselves. And that's how we get these people to find their passions, or get the world
Basically,
to find their
you're
passions.
building a joy pyramid scheme.
Yeah, 100%. We just need 30 minutes of your time.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Joy Quota party.
Yes.
Well, if you give me 40 joys, then
you'll meet the quota.
you can get 40 joys from 10 different people.
Yeah. Essentially.
Yeah. Imagine how many joys you guys will have.
Like 4,000?
Joy wealthy
least.
for sure.
It'll just be like, I don't know, crazy amount of joys.
We'll be making so much joy, we'll get to give it away. It'll be amazing.
You're not going to give it away.
Oh, I will.
You're going to build it into a joy empire.
Yes.
I'm okay with having a
Joy
joy
Quota empire.
I would
is
like
amazing.
a joy empire.
Yeah, I love everything about that. That's the best. Oh my gosh. Well, dude, thank you so much for coming on. We always end on the same question, unless there's anything specifically that you want to go over, or anything that you felt like we missed.
Oh man, I'm like, I don't know. I haven't watched the Joy Quota in so many months. I don't even know what the last question is. I'm not prepared.
Good. Yes. Joy is always right around the corner if surprise is involved. Just when you think of the word joy, what comes to mind? This is just for you. It doesn't need to be a good piece of story or inspirational or anything. This is just a nice little moment where you can really just reflect on like what joy means to you.
Yeah, and I talked to you guys about this backstage of like, the irony of you guys bringing me on, because I don't think I've ever in my life once been referred to as a joyous person necessarily. I'm more of a curmudgeon. I'm a skeptic. But yeah, I think that for me, I just learned about joy, when I'm able to spend time with my son and being in the moment with him, and soon to be my daughter as well. That I didn't really even know what that was until is just one-on-one, and it's like, oh, this is joy. I truly didn't know what it was before that. Like, as much as it's fun as I had in my life, skiing, biking, doing all this adventurous shit that I love to do and have all these hobbies, like, it doesn't even compare. And to me, that's joy. Is nothing matters except your family, which can also mean your friends, but your closest loved ones, and particularly your kids. Selfishly, probably because they're like a little piece of you, know? And it's like, am I really happy about this, or am I just selfishly enjoying this because you look a lot like me, buddy? So it's kind of a joke, but at the same time, like it really rings true that like that is that's joy to me. And I'd have 10 kids if I didn't have so many hobbies.
That's awesome.
Yeah.